When I first started training, one of my goals was to have massive quads. The majority of my leg training, it was leg extensions, leg curls, squats, and leg presses. And building legs was a pretty straightforward process. As my squats increased, my legs, they got bigger. I started squatting around 135 pounds with skinny legs. When I got up to a 225 pound squat, I made some decent improvements. And when I got up to 315 pounds for sets of 10 to 12, I had decent development. But then something interesting happened. I kept doing what I'd always done, and now I was chasing a 400 and a 500 pound squat. And as I went from 315 pounds to 365 pounds to 405 pounds for reps, my strength kept going up, but my legs, they didn't really improve that much, especially my quads. My lower back got a little bit thicker, my hamstrings improved slightly, but overall, not much change. And definitely not like when I first started lifting. And then I started to think about it more. All of the strongest powerlifters that I knew, they had great legs. These guys were squatting 500 plus pounds. But then over the years, I started to notice a trend. These guys were continuing to add 50 to 100 pounds to their squat year after year, but their leg development was actually staying virtually the same. And after feeling like the traditional barbell squat was only taking my development so far, I decided to go back and take a look at what some old school bodybuilders were doing to build their legs. Many of them squatted heavy, but they also did a lot of odd movements. Guys like Vince Gironda, who was a celebrity trainer and coach of many bodybuilding champions, he absolutely hated the back squat. He also heavily promoted the use of sissy squats, hack squats, and front squat variations. Guys like Frank Zane loved leg presses with the low foot placement. And if we go back even further, we have guys like Steve Reeves. He loved to do snatch grip deadlifts, behind the back deadlifts, or barbell hack squats. And what I realized with a lot of these movements is that traditional barbell squats are absolutely a fundamental movement, and they should absolutely be trained, especially early on in your development. The barbell squat can be largely a hip-dominant movement for many lifters, and a lot of these non-traditional exercises that I had been seeing were very quad or knee joint dominant movements. And while exposing your body to some heavy loads on a traditional barbell squat is an excellent way to build mass to your entire lower body, it's not necessarily the best quad-specific movement you could do, especially if they're a lagging muscle group for you. And at this point, I started applying some of these movements, and I started out very simple. I was doing a lot of hack squats at the gym simply because the machine at the gym was very good. I was also hack squatting with a barbell behind my back. And as I started progressing on these movements, what do you know? My quads specifically started growing again. And over the next few years, I started to seek out more movements that were very quad specific. I started doing Zercher squats, which to this day are still one of my favorite exercises for the lower body and quad specifically. By doing this movement and holding the barbell right between your elbows, you're basically keeping the weight right at the center of your torso. This personally gives me the most natural feeling when squatting, opposed to having a barbell on your back, which naturally pushes the torso forward. This natural upright position on the Zercher squat allows for maximum knee bend and full depth. This makes it a much more quad-specific exercise. Many people will say on this movement you're limited to how much weight you can hold, but I've personally squatted over 3 plates on this exercise, and it's not really a movement that I feel you need to go super heavy on. Higher reps work excellent here. Many people will say, why don't you just front squat? The reason is the bar placement is just not the same, and Zercher squats are still a more quad-specific exercise than a front squat. Unless you try it, you might not understand. The next movement I love is the sissy squat. This is another old school exercise that's traditionally done with a machine that locks your feet into position. But if you don't have one, you can even do it with a heavy enough resistance band. And personally, I prefer this variation. This allows me to get even more out of the top of the movement by stepping back further into the band. Normally at the top of the squat, there's very little tension on the quads. Now with a sissy squat, you're basically turning a squat into a squat leg extension hybrid. You're also able to sink in much deeper on this movement. But as you come to the top, be prepared for a crazy quad contraction, almost exactly like you would feel on a leg extension. This movement was traditionally done at the end of a training session to pump as much blood into the muscle. If you're a very strong squatter, that's probably a good idea, as you won't need to hold as much weight on this movement, as it's not the most comfortable to load. But also, don't sleep on these as an exercise to start your workout. Nothing beats the quad pump and warm up that I get when starting with these. And doing so makes every exercise I do after much more beneficial, in my opinion. And lastly, the exercise I mentioned previously, hack squats. If your gym has a good machine, go after it. But unfortunately, over the years, I've seen less and less solid hack squats machines in most gyms. And most of the ones I've used just wreck my knees. But if you're at home or you want to try a free weight version, set up a plate on the floor for heel elevation. You can also use a block for these, or if you have a squat wedge, even better. You can use a barbell and hold it behind your body, or if you have access to a trap bar and you don't want to worry about the bar hitting your legs, step inside the trap bar and flip over the handles. Keep the torso upright and push those knees as far forward and out as possible. Really focus on increasing that range of motion for the quads and try to get the best knee bend and stretch of the quads as possible. And if you do this movement correctly, by the end of the set, nothing should be burning but your quads. My advice for anyone who wants to try these movements: don't skip out on your heavy basic movements like barbell squats. That strength base is essential, and the benefits of heavy squatting go beyond just quad development. But once you've established a strength base in that movement, and you want to incorporate more quad-specific training, include hack squats, whether that's a machine or barbell. Experiment with sissy squats, whether that's at the beginning or end of your training session. And don't sleep on Zercher squats. They're by far not one of the most common exercises in bodybuilding, but I think if more people understood the benefits of them, we'd see them done a lot more. And if you want the exact training programs that I recommend to build muscle using proven old school bodybuilding methods, check out all my old school mass game programs down below. And as always, if you guys want to see more of the best original bodybuilding content just like this, make sure to hit subscribe.